Hello and welcome to the Bald Ambition podcast. I am your bald host, Mookie Spitz, and the ambition that I'll be focusing on today is how to get famous on ChatGPT. As a strategist in marketing and PR, with a healthcare focus, but branching into technology, startups, advocacy, politics, even home renovation, I have enjoyed the luxury of playing chess from above the board, as it were. As a strategist, you take a look at the entire picture. You pull a brand through everything from the initial research, audience analytics, into brand strategy, into high-level messaging, into creative. Then you do tactical ideation, which you branch out into the multi-channel environment in the form of ads, placements, content, social media interaction, influencer marketing. And then you set up key performance indicators by which you measure success. You measure it, you report back, rinse, and repeat. That's a fairly standard slide with the chevrons in it that every agency and consultant pitches to brands, products, services. Doesn't really matter the vertical. But again, as the senior strategist sitting in the room, seeing that big picture, looking down at the chessboard, moving those pieces around, the point of view is top down. And what I've really been enjoying, especially over the last couple years, is taking the reverse bottom-up approach to things by becoming my own content creator. In the past, we would hire podcasters, influencers, bloggers and writers, creatives, and generate content that fit the brand identity and strategy that could be layered into some of the tactical recommendations and then blasted out there across all the different available channels. But again, over the last couple years, my role has been progressively reversing into that of the tactical folks who execute on the plan to deliver content to directly connect with the audience types. Now, I've got my own brand here, Mookie Spitz. I'm the bald guy on Bald Ambition. I also have two other alopecia influenced podcasts, as it were. No Hair, All Heart focuses on emotions and relationships. And Bald and Bloviating focuses on politics, various interests, stuff that falls out of this dual category of consultative selling, messaging, big business, which is this one, and the affairs of the heart per se. And I've been having a blast with all three. In addition to that, I have been putting together first-person reels and even stand-up routines on TikTok. At first, it started just as an experiment for a client, and then it picked up its own steam, gained its own momentum. And I'm doing pretty well for a bald guy, ranting most often in his kitchen on just about every subject under the sun and burning my bald head when I don't wear a hat. Everything from politics to technology to relationships. And I've built up a pretty good following organically, about 15,400 or so followers. And I've gotten nearly 250,000 likes and tens of thousands of comments just blasting videos out there across all these different subjects. In addition to that, I've been blogging on Medium. I've got over 450 blog posts on Medium covering various topics. And I've also published a few books, self-published, on Amazon. So cumulatively, I've got a lot of content out there. Now, what ties it all together is this Mookie Spitz brand. At the same time, my audiences are very, very diverse. Everything from the Kurdish people in the Middle East, where I just randomly shared a video expressing interest in their situation, and it went viral to the point of 600,000 views. I was astonished. To Latin folks here in the States, I put up an anti-mass deportation video sympathetic to so many people who have lived here 4 years. I mean, regardless of your political affiliation, I just find it terrible that folks who've been living here for decades have families and are sent back. I just don't like that. And I posted a heartfelt video, and that had something like 350,000 views. So I bring all this up not to in any way gloat, and given those numbers, I couldn't really gloat because these are minuscule, absolutely infinitesimal compared to the overall volume of social media engagement. Even compared to most influencers, I think this kind of reach and engagement categorizes me as the micro influencer. So I know where I'm at. I've got a sense of perspective, but my essential point in all of this is I have hands-on experience in ways I never did when I was simply an agency strategist, spending all my time working directly with brands and essentially hiring folks to do what I'm doing now. Now, one of the interesting consequences of being in the trenches, so to speak, is that rather than monitoring these trends and these transformations in technology and communications, in media, from that macro level, citing sources, reading sources, doing research, measuring these for our clients, I am in those trenches and I'm experiencing these transformations firsthand. So let me give you a specific example, which is what's triggered this podcast bloviation. I have all of these podcasts and books and videos. And yet, despite the numbers I'm citing, I don't feel that I've really cracked the viral nut. I don't have what could be called a Mookie Spitz community. I have random visitors for the most part. I mean, I have my fans, but they're not in the tens of thousands, ideally the hundreds of thousands, which could become its own self-sustaining, monetizable enterprise. By any stretch of the imagination, I'm still considered a dabbler. I'm having a terrific time. I can't get enough of it. But I'm still junior level in this social media influencer game, as it were. But when I prompt ChatGPT to tell me about myself, the one entity, as it were, and I find this striking, who's been paying very, very close attention to everything that I've been doing, inclusive of this podcast after I post it, is, of course, the LLMs that are out there. The large language models are monitoring every move I make, every podcast, every transcription, every video, every blog, and presumably all of my books are being spidered and scanned, dissected into tokens, and pumped into the mainframe. Now, the LLM companies, as we know, are desperate to get their hands on as much human-generated content as they can. This is food for the GPT, generative pre-trained transformer. The pre-training is vital to hone their skills. Pump all those tokens, do the matrix math, create the associations, and then they're better and better at addressing the prompt requests. That's how these things work. But the reason, again, I bring this up is if I've been struggling to expand reach, or if I sometimes feel bad that I'm not making as much of an impact as I would like, and don't get me wrong, I'm appreciative. I'm not conscientiously trying to expand that reach. But every once in a while, when I look at a piece of content that I just find so substandard, and I find that it has 300,000 likes, I just scratch my chin and say, where's everyone for my stuff? Or I just did a video and I thought it was pretty funny. How come no one else really does? Well, the algorithms rule, precedence reigns king, and content and context are queen. But suffice to say that I do want bigger reach. It'd be nice to monetize more efficiently. Yet, the bots are paying attention. And they're paying attention to everything. Let me cite an example. I went to ChatGPT on a whim pretty much, and I asked it, tell me about Mookie Spitz. That was it. And I got several hundred words, most of it quite accurate, spanning the depth and breadth of the content that I more or less have outlined. It also added a few insights about my style, my overall approach, and my leaning towards certain subjects in a certain way. And it was very, very interesting. I liked seeing my reflection in the LLM mirror. But that got me to thinking, wondering how deep that goes. So then I typed, tell me about Mookie Spitz's relationship with the singer and songwriter Beck. Back in 1986, I actually befriended the young Beck in North Hollywood, California. He was 16 years old. I was maybe 21, 22. Sounds odd in retrospect, but it was definitely an LA kind of friendship. If you're curious about it, I'll put links in the description here. But suffice to say, ChatGPT knew all about it. When I hit that prompt, tell me about Mookie Spitz and Beck, I got the details of our relationship, and I got the sources. I wrote a blog, I did a podcast, and all the information was reflective of the data that I had shared. And this can go, of course, on and on and on. After I publish this podcast, it'll be easy to see or easy to predict that the subject matter of this will be summarized and to a certain extent and with certain insight analyzed. I could, if I want to, cross-reference my different themes. I am now a topic for the LLMs to brood over and dynamically analyze. So my first takeaway from all this, from being in the trenches and playing around with this, and all this seems retrospectively obvious, is that I might not have a Mark Maron or Joe Rogan following, but every move I make is being tracked and dissected, chopped up into tokens, redistributed, and dynamically reformulated out there. That's insight, obvious insight number one. The second insight from a PR point of view is the information that came up. Here's my critical point with this. The information that came up vis-a-vis my friendship with Beck was all solely based on the source material. So when the query was entered, Mookie and Beck, the report that was generated, as it were, was solely based on my content. Now, I've worked in PR for years, so I have a hands-on experience with the operations of a PR company. And back in the day, pre-digital, and the veterans there, as I used to hang out with them, used to gloat and used to kind of shake their heads as to how relatively easy it was. You simply had to nail a couple outlets, main outlets. If you got your Reuters reporter to run, air quote, your story, your job was done that day. And I remember showing up, and there was a regional manager who opened up the New York Times health section and pointed to it. He said, "Spitz, come here." And I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Look at this. That's ours. That's ours." Turn the page. That's ours. And that's ours. So once again, PR is an industry of influence. And PR, old school, was hitting those main outlets, getting the word out there for your clients. No news flash there, figuratively or literally. But with the advent of digital and media fragmentation, that became progressively more difficult. More and more outlets, more and more influencers, both professional and amateur. And the successful amateurs reaching the point where they were their own professionals. More mouths to feed, as it were, more influencers to appease, at the very least, educate. Now, if we look at 1.0, the days of broadcast TV and print, and if we look at digital led by search websites as 2.0, then PR 3.0, that of the bots, is pretty much pumping and priming the LLMs with data that they then chop up and put back together based not on, air quote, authoritative sources, so to speak, but just based on presence, presumably based on volume. Now, obviously, the LLMs are sorting through mountains of garbage. And a critical aspect of the transformer model is differentiating the wheat from the chaff, the diamonds from the rough. If you take a look at some of the descriptions of the transformer technology, it's kind of the opposite of garbage in, garbage out. It's garbage in and a whole lot of work that goes into getting clear, concise, generally accurate information out. But making that distinction between what is truth and what isn't, especially in this age when the foundations of what is true and what is false are being called into question, is getting progressively more difficult. And simply by my demonstration of typing in the prompt, "Tell me about Mookie Spitz and the singer Beck," it cited my source. No one else is talking about Mookie Spitz and Beck, and I bet you Beck won't remember me, and if he does, I'd be astonished. But he's not searching for Beck and Mookie Spitz, and until now, you had no idea that I was friends with him, and even after I mention it, you probably don't care. But my point is, I am the sole source of this data. And ChatGPT did not differentiate me from any other source, whether more or less popular, whether more or less authoritative. So the doping of the LLMs has already begun, and I am sure I am begging the question, and I apologize if I am preaching to the choir, but I am certain that a huge, huge part of the modern PR reputation management industry is already what I'm calling doping the LLMs. Just get the information out there, get the information scraped. It gets chopped into those tokens, and then it gets reconfigured and reconstructed in endless, inconceivably endless, and impossible really to anticipate kinds of ways that can nonetheless be influenced by the data that goes out there onto the web. We're already reading about companies that are spawning hundreds, if not thousands, of websites, which is similar to the cheating that went on in the early days of the search engines to shift the scale for SEO, for search engine optimization. I remember when the web first started cranking out on there that keywords would be hidden on web pages in white font on a white background. So the spiders would see multiple words on that page and then rank the pages accordingly. So a similar type of cheat is working with regard to the LLMs and just content, period. And I find this fascinating. And it's something that not too many folks are talking about, but I think they should. And it's going to reach a fever pitch where the doping of the LLMs are going to get completely out of hand. Perhaps even more out of hand than people just indiscriminately using the LLMs and shamelessly doing so for creating content. You know, I can't stand even going to Facebook anymore because my feed is full of groups and ads that are all clearly GPT generated content. Oftentimes, the distributors of this content don't even bother to change the formatting. The distinctive asterisks of ChatGPT are transposed right into or I should say cut and pasted right into the ads. So we're seeing an upcoming train wreck, I think, of these large language models being abused. Gen Zers are now calling folks who abuse these large language models as clankers. You're a clanker if you just prompt and cut and paste. So clankers are endemic out there. And I'm sure you've got companies, products, services, governments who are polluting the internet with petabytes of content just to sway the LLMs to produce prompt-driven results that are favorable to those products, those services. So I think this is a problem that's already here, that's going to be catastrophic, looming on the horizon. And it's been fun, frankly, discovering some of this from the inside out, where I'm just this bald guy throwing stuff out there. I'm not even that greedy for too much reach, but you could always use a little bit more love on screen and off. And discovering little nuggets like this, which hint at bigger trends and potentially bigger train wrecks, is a real joy to behold. So if you want to be famous on ChatGPT, ask one of the LLMs about yourself and see what comes up. And if you want to tweak it a little bit, keep asking it questions which baits the large language models to start creating answers for other folks who might be asking about you. Because if you know how these bots operate, it's not just the content that they scrape and break into tokens and pre-train, But it's also dependent on prior prompts and the kinds of questions that are being asked about that content. So you could load the playing field, you could prime the pump in both of these directions, and probably a whole lot more directions that I haven't even thought about. So welcome to this brave new world of content strategy, of media, of marketing and advertising in the age of AI. And we're learning as we go. The developers are making it up as they go along. And who would have known that in only 3 years after ChatGPT launched in November, late November of 2022, that in 3 short years, the number one chip manufacturer in the world would be the number one company in the world, NVIDIA cracking 4 trillion, up there with Microsoft pretty much for the same reason. And this is just the start. Is it a bubble? I don't think so. Self-driving taxis are coming to a neighborhood near you. And that's just one of many endless expressions of this brave new world of AI, eventually culminating in AGI. Hold your breath. Thanks for listening. I'm interested always in your feedback, and more to come on this and other AI-focused topics.